She sat in the back of a wagon, hands folded in her lap, eyes fixed on the dirt road disappearing behind her. She was not crying. She had stopped crying 3 days ago, somewhere between the moment her father shook hands with a man she had never met and the moment she realized that no one was coming to stop it. Her name was Clara Weston. She was 26 years old, and she had just been promised to Elias Grubb, a man of 61, a man with yellow teeth and a cold handshake and a way of looking at her that made her feel like a piece of furniture being appraised before purchase. Her father had called it a arrangement. Her stepmother had called it a blessing. Clara called it what it was. And still, no one listened. The wagon rolled deeper into the dry Texas hill country, carrying her toward a life she had never chosen, toward a house she had never seen, toward a man who had paid for her company the way you pay for a mule at a county fair. Her small travel bag sat beside her. Inside it were 2 dresses, a Bible her mother had left her, and a small photograph of a woman with kind eyes. That woman had been gone for 12 years. Clara had been missing her every single day since. If you have ever felt like your life was being decided by someone else, like your voice did not matter, like the people who were supposed to protect you handed you over instead, then this story is for you. Stay with me, because what happens next changed everything. And before we go any further, if you love slow, warm, emotional Western romance stories about women who find protection, home, and love in the most unexpected places, please subscribe right now and hit that bell. New stories go up every week, and you do not want to miss a single one. Now, back to Clara. The wagon stopped at a small town called Millhaven, just a dust-blown collection of buildings pressed between 2 dry hills. There was a general store, a church with a crooked steeple, a blacksmith, a saloon with a broken sign, and a wide dirt main street that looked like it had not seen rain in a month. Elias Grubb was waiting outside the saloon. He was shorter than she remembered, thicker around the middle. He wore a brown coat that was too warm for the season and a hat that sat slightly crooked on his head. When he saw the wagon pull up, he smiled. It was not a warm smile. He walked toward her with that smile still on his face, and he said, loud enough for the men nearby to hear, that she was smaller than he expected, but that she would do just fine. Clara did not speak. She stepped down from the wagon without help, without looking at him, and she stood in the dust of that main street with her small bag in her hand and her chin lifted just slightly, because that was the only dignity she had left, and she was not going to let go of it. That was when she heard a voice from across the street. It was a low voice. Quiet. Not loud, not demanding, but the kind of voice that you heard even when other sounds were all around you. Grubb. One word. Clara turned. There was a man leaning against the post outside the general store. Tall, broad through the shoulders. He wore a worn brown hat pulled low and a dark work coat with the sleeves pushed up. He had dark hair going slightly gray at the temples and a jaw that looked like it had been carved from something harder than bone. He was not young, maybe late 30s, early 40s, with the kind of face that held more silence than words. Elias Grubb turned too, and something shifted in his expression, something small and nervous. Holt, he said, and tried to keep his voice steady. The man named Holt pushed off the post and walked across the street with the unhurried stride of a man who owned the ground he walked on, even when he did not. His name was Reed Holt. Clara would learn that later. At that moment, all she knew was that he was walking toward them with calm, deliberate steps, and that Elias Grubb had gone slightly pale. Reed Holt stopped a few feet away. He looked at Grubb for a long moment. Then he looked at Clara, and his gaze was not like Grubb's gaze. It did not take, it simply saw. This the arrangement you told Finch about? He asked Grubb, his voice still quiet. Grubb straightened. My business, Holt, not yours. Millhaven makes it mine, Reed said simply. Something was happening between these 2 men, something with history underneath it, something Clara did not fully understand yet, but she watched it unfold with the stillness of a woman who had learned early that watching carefully was how you survived. Grubb reached into his coat and pulled out a folded paper. Contract's already signed, he said, holding it up like a shield. Her father agreed. It's done. Reed looked at the paper. Then he looked at Clara again, just for a moment, and in that moment she felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt seen. He looked back at Grubb. How much? He said. It was not a question. Grubb blinked. What? How much did you pay her father? That's not how this works, Holt. I'll buy the contract, Reed said. Whatever you paid, plus 10%. The street had gone quiet. Clara realized that several people had stopped moving, had stopped pretending not to watch. The blacksmith had appeared in his doorway. A woman on the porch of the dry goods store had gone very still. Grubb laughed, but it was an uncomfortable laugh. She's not a piece of land, Holt. No, Reed said. She's not. So stop treating her like one. Something in Clara's chest broke open a little at those words. Grubb's face darkened. You got no right. I got cash money and a reason, Reed said quietly. You got a contract signed by a man who sold his daughter. You want to be the kind of man who holds on to that, Elias? In this town? In front of these people? The silence stretched long and dry as the hill country around them. Elias Grubb looked at Clara, then at Reed, then at the people watching from their doorways and porches. His face did something complicated. Then he reached out, snatched the paper from his own hand, and shoved it toward Reed's chest. "Keep her then," he said. "More trouble than she's worth." And he walked away. Clara stood very still in the middle of that street. Reed Holt held the folded paper. He looked at it for a moment. Then he tucked it into his coat and turned to Clara. "You got anywhere to go?" he asked. She met his eyes. They were gray, she noticed. Steady and gray. "No," she said. He nodded once. "My ranch is 8 miles out. You can stay until you figure something out. No strings. Just shelter." She should have said no. Every practical thought in her head told her that accepting shelter from a stranger was its own kind of risk. But she had just been handed across a wagon seat like luggage, and this man had spent his own money to stop it, and he had done it without asking anything of her. And so she picked up her small bag and she said quietly, "All right." They rode in his wagon, side by side, in almost complete silence for the first 4 miles. Clara watched the land open up around her, the dry golden grass, the scattered cedar trees, the wide pale sky. It was not the kind of beauty you noticed right away. It was the kind that settled into you slowly. Finally, she said, "Why did you do that?" Reed kept his eyes on the road ahead. His hands on the reins were steady and unhurried. "Grubb's got a history," he said. 3 wives. None of them stayed long. One of them didn't leave on her own. Clara felt something cold move through her. "I couldn't watch it happen again," he said. That was all. He did not explain further. He did not need to. They arrived at his ranch as the sun was going low and orange over the hills. The house was not large, but it was solid. Good stone foundation, wide porch, a barn off to the right, fields stretching back toward a tree line. There were 2 horses in the paddock. A dog of undetermined color came running from somewhere and circled the wagon twice before sitting down to look at Clara with an expression of serious evaluation. "That's Biscuit," Reed said. Clara looked at the dog. "Hello, Biscuit." The dog thumped its tail once on the ground and seemed to decide she was acceptable. They went inside. The house was clean but sparse. A main room with a fireplace, a small kitchen area, a long wooden table with 4 chairs, even though it was clearly a house with only 1 person in it. There was a closed door off the main room and another door at the back. "That was my son's room," Reed said, nodding at the closed door. He said it without emotion, but with the particular careful stillness of a man who had practiced keeping his voice flat. Clara looked at the closed door and understood that she should not ask. Not yet. "Back room is the guest room," he said. "Yours for as long as you need." She set her bag down on the chair by the door. She turned to look at him. "Mr. Holt," she said, "I want you to know that I'm not going to be a burden. I can cook, I can clean, I can help with whatever needs doing. I'm not asking for charity." He looked at her with those steady gray eyes for a moment. "Didn't think you were," he said. That was the beginning. The days that followed had a rhythm to them that Clara had not expected. Reed rose before dawn and was out in the fields or the barn by the time the sun came up. She made breakfast and left it covered on the table. He came in, ate, said a few words about the weather or what needed doing, and went back out. She cleaned, mended, tended the kitchen garden that had gone slightly wild, and found small ways to make the house feel less empty. Biscuit followed her everywhere. In the evenings, Reed came in at dusk and they ate together in mostly comfortable quiet. He was not a man who talked for the sake of talking, but when he did speak, it mattered. He told her once that the north fence needed mending before the rains came, and he said it the way other men might say something important. She noticed that about him, the way his words were few and therefore worth listening to. On the 4th day, she found the small boots by the back door. They were child-sized. Brown leather, worn at the toes, laces carefully tied and then left there, as if whoever had taken them off expected to put them back on again soon. She stood looking at them for a long time. That evening at supper, she asked, gently, carefully, if there was a child she should know about. She said it the way you ask a question when you are prepared for the answer to hurt. Reed set down his fork. For a moment. "His name was Thomas," he said. "He was 7. He died 2 winters ago. Fever." The room was very quiet. "I'm sorry," Clara said, and she meant it the way you mean something when words are not enough and you say them anyway because silence would be worse. Reed nodded. He picked up his fork again. But something between them had shifted. Some thin wall had gone slightly transparent, and they both felt it. She did not sleep well that night. She lay in the guest room, listening to the wind move through the cedar trees outside, and she thought about a little boy named Thomas who had small brown boots by the back door. She thought about a man who had kept those boots there, just there, for 2 winters. She thought about what it was to lose something you loved completely, and to keep living anyway, to get up every morning and go work the land and eat supper and say a few words and do it all over again with that absence sitting in the room like weather. She knew something about that kind of loss. Her mother had died when Clara was 14, and her father, rather than holding what remained of their family together, had turned away from her toward a new wife who did not want a stepdaughter in the house. She had spent 12 years being tolerated, and then she had been sold, like something that needed to be cleared away. In the morning, she got up and made breakfast, and when Reed came in from the barn, she had made biscuits, the real kind, the kind that took time and butter and care, and she had set them on the table beside the eggs and the coffee. He sat down and looked at the biscuits, and then up at her. "I used to make these for my mother," she said simply. He ate 2 of them without speaking, and then he said quietly, "They're good." That was everything. 3 weeks passed like this, slow and quiet and warming, the way spring comes to dry country, not all at once but in small, persistent degrees. Then one morning a wagon came up the road fast. Clara was hanging washing on the line when she heard it. She turned and saw a woman driving the wagon hard, a woman she recognized from town, the wife of the blacksmith, her face drawn with worry. Reed came out of the barn. "It's the Penny girl," the blacksmith's wife called out before the wagon fully stopped. "Little May Penny. She wandered off from her grandmother's place this morning, been gone 2 hours. The grandmother's near sick with worry and her father's out working the South Range, can't reach him." Clara knew about May Penny. She had seen her once in town, a small girl of about 5, with red braids and serious brown eyes, who had looked at Clara's blue dress and announced very solemnly that it was the color of a good sky. Reed was already moving toward his horse. Clara untied her apron and followed. They found May Penny 2 miles out, sitting under a juniper tree on the bank of a dry creek, completely unhurt and utterly unconcerned about the alarm she had caused. She had a collection of interesting rocks arranged neatly in front of her and was examining each one with the focused attention of a scientist. She looked up when they rode up and said, "Hello," as if she had been expecting company. Clara swung down from the horse before Reed even stopped fully. She walked to May and crouched down in front of her and said, "Your grandmother is very worried about you." May considered this. "I found good rocks," she said. "I can see that," Clara said. "They are very good rocks. Would you like to bring them with you?" May looked at her rocks, then at Clara. "All of them?" "All of them," Clara said. They filled the pockets of May's pinafore with rocks, and then Clara picked her up and carried her back. And May, who was generally a suspicious child around strangers, put her head on Clara's shoulder with the total unself-consciousness of a child who decides instantly whether someone is safe. Reed watched this from horseback. He watched Clara carry that small girl through the dry grass with the afternoon light coming down golden and warm, and something in his chest moved that had not moved in a very long time. May Penny became a regular presence at the ranch after that. Her father, a decent but overwhelmed widower named Carl, worked long hours and her grandmother was aging, and sometimes Clara simply went to town and brought May back for the afternoon, and May sat at the long table with its 4 chairs and did her drawings while Clara worked and asked a continuous stream of questions about everything she observed. One afternoon, May looked at the closed door off the main room and asked, "What's in there?" Clara said gently, "That was Mr. Holt's son's room. His name was Thomas." May absorbed this. "Where did Thomas go?" "He went to heaven," Clara said. May thought about this for a moment. "Does Mr. Holt miss him?" "Very much," Clara said. May nodded seriously. She went back to her drawing. A minute later she said without looking up, "My mama went to heaven too. Papa says she's watching." "I think she is," Clara said. "Are you going to stay here?" May asked, still drawing. Clara paused. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. May looked up then with those serious brown eyes. "I hope you do," she said. "This house needs someone to keep its lights on." Clara looked around the room. The fire was going, the windows were clean, there were dried wildflowers in a jar on the table that she had put there last week. The house did look different than it had 3 weeks ago. She had not thought about it quite like that. That evening she told Reed what May had said. They were sitting on the porch after supper, something they had started doing without ever deciding to, watching the last of the light leave the sky. Reed held his coffee cup in both hands. He listened. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "She's not wrong." Clara looked at him. "About the lights," he said. He did not look at her when he said it, But there was something in his voice that was different than usual, something that cost him something to say. She looked back at the darkening hills. "Reed," she said. It was the first time she had used his given name. He noticed. She noticed him notice. "What is it you actually want?" she asked. "Not what's practical, not what makes sense. What do you actually want?" He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "I want the house not to be so quiet. I want to hear someone else in the morning. I want—" He stopped. He looked at his hands. "I want Thomas's room to stop being a door I walk past." Clara felt her heart ache in the kindest way it had ever ached. "I think," she said carefully, "that wanting those things doesn't mean forgetting him." Reed looked at her then. Really looked at her. "No," he said quietly. "I suppose it doesn't." 2 days later, Elias Grubb came to the ranch. He did not come alone. He brought a man with him, a lawyer from the county seat, thin and sharp-eyed, carrying a leather case. They came in a good carriage, not a work wagon, and Grubb had dressed for the occasion in his brown coat. Clara saw them coming from the kitchen window. Her hands went still on the bread she was making. Reed was in the barn. She went to get him. They met Grubb and his lawyer on the porch. Grubb said that the contract Clara's father had signed was valid and legal, and that Reed had purchased a contract, not a person, and that the contract was not transferable, and that Clara was required by its terms to return with him to fulfill its conditions. The lawyer opened his case and produced papers. Clara stood very still. Reed looked at the papers. Then he looked at Grubb. Then he said calmly to the lawyer, "Is that contract conditional on the woman's unmarried status?" The lawyer blinked, looked at his papers. "Standard terms would indicate yes or no," Reed said. "Yes," the lawyer said slowly. Reed looked at Clara, and she looked at him, and something passed between them that was a question and an answer all at once. He said, very quietly, just to her, "It would solve the legal problem. If you're willing, no other obligation, just your protection." She thought about the wagon rolling toward Millhaven. She thought about yellow teeth and a cold handshake. She thought about small brown boots by a back door and a little girl with red braids who said this house needs someone to keep its lights on. She said, yes. They were married 3 days later in the Millhaven church with the crooked steeple, with the blacksmith and his wife as witnesses, and May Penny in the front pew wearing her best dress and holding her collection of interesting rocks in her pinafore pocket for good luck. Grubb's contract was void. He left Millhaven a week after that, and no one was sorry to see him go. In the weeks that followed, something changed at the ranch, and also something did not change at all. Reed still rose before dawn. She still made breakfast. They still ate supper together in the warm quiet of the kitchen. But now when he came in from the fields, there was something easier about the way he moved through the house, as if he had stopped bracing against it. One evening, he came in carrying something. He set it on the table in front of her. It was Thomas's boots. She looked at them, then at him. "I thought," he said, "that maybe they could go on the shelf. Not hidden. Just there." She understood what he was saying. She picked up the small boots gently and carried them to the shelf beside the fireplace and set them there, in the warmth of the firelight, where they could be seen. Reed watched her do it. His face was very still, but his eyes were not. "Clara," he said. She turned. He crossed the room in 3 steps, and he took her face in both his calloused hands, the way you hold something you are afraid of breaking, and he said, "I didn't plan on any of this." "Neither did I," she said. "But I'm glad of it," he said. "All of it." "So am I," she said. He kissed her the way a quiet man loves, slowly, carefully, with everything he had been holding in reserve. Spring came properly to the hill country after that, green pushing up through the dry gold grass, rain coming twice in a week. The garden behind the house grew. The north fence got mended. Biscuit learned to sit on command but chose not to whenever he felt it was unnecessary. May Penny came out every Saturday and sat at the long table and did her drawings, and one afternoon she held one up and showed it to Clara, a house drawn in bright crayon with a yellow sun above it and 4 figures standing in front of it, a tall man, a woman, a little girl, and a dog. "That's us," May said simply. Clara looked at the drawing for a long moment. "Can I keep this?" she asked. May considered it. "You can have it," she said generously. "I'll make another." Clara put it on the shelf beside Thomas's boots. That evening when Reed came in and washed up and sat down at the table, he looked at the shelf and saw the drawing there beside the small boots. He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached out and straightened the drawing slightly so it stood more firmly. He sat down. She set supper on the table. Biscuit settled by the fire. Outside, the spring wind moved through the cedar trees, soft and easy and smelling of rain. Clara looked across the table at this quiet man who had spent his own money to stop a stranger's suffering, who had kept small boots by a door for 2 winters, who had held her face like something worth keeping. She thought about her father's wagon rolling away behind her. She thought about how lost you can be, how completely a life can go wrong, how the people who should protect you sometimes don't, and how sometimes in the most unexpected places, a stranger does. She was home. Not the home she had been born into or the one she had been sold toward. The one she had found. The one that had kept its lights on until she arrived. If this story moved you even a little, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment and tell me your favorite part, or just tell me where in the world you are watching from tonight. There are people watching these stories from quiet houses in the mountains and little apartments in big cities and front porches in small towns, and I love knowing you are out there. If you are not subscribed yet, please do it now. These stories are made for you, for the quiet evenings, for the moments when you want something warm and real and worth your time. A new story goes up every single week, and every single one is made with care. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. Clara found her home, and I hope, wherever you are tonight, you feel a little of that too.